I'm Sarah and I work with Greenstyle Creations and I blog at sewingwithsarah.com, and I'm excited to bring you the Super G Tight Sew Along. This is definitely my favorite leggings pattern right now. I have 5 or 6 pairs of them and I was excited to do the sew along so I could make a few more with you. So that just kind of shows you how much I love them and wear them every day. I think that there's kind of a conception that the Super G tights are just for working out, and I just want to start out by saying that that's absolutely not true. They make an awesome workout pant, but as you can see, I'm wearing mine today, and I'm not planning on doing a workout. It's my rest day. So I wear them all the time. I find that their extra long gusset does a really good job of providing just extra comfort and a really good range of movement when I'm just chasing the kiddos around or going to the grocery store. If I could wear them to work, I would. So I'm excited to be sewing these along with you this week. If you haven't ever done a sew along before, I'm just going to give a little rundown of how it works. Basically each day I'll be posting a video with the steps that you'll need for that day. So today, for example, our job is to determine our size, our options, and then print out our pattern and cut out our fabric. And then I'll be posting another video the next day and the next day for the length of the sew along, in this case 4 or 5 days, to walk you through the pattern step by step. You're absolutely welcome to jump ahead if you feel confident enough to do that. You can definitely jump ahead and make more than one pair during the sew along or finish early. And the same thing if you're not able to keep up with it day by day, it's okay to go back. These videos will remain on my blog, sewingwithsarah.com, under the sew along tab. So you're always welcome to come back and pick up wherever you left off. Sometimes life gets in the way, and so I don't want you to feel stressed out if that happens to you. So first thing I want to do before getting started with actually cutting out our fabric is to talk about sizing. So when we're making the Super G tights, if you've made, the Greenstyle Inspires or Strides, which I also love, these fit very similarly. And I have the same size on that I use in those other leggings patterns from Greenstyle. They are a slightly more compressive fit, which I really like. It just gives me a better comfort as I wear them. So, definitely keep in mind as we talk the stretch of your fabric and kind of where you fall in the size range. I would highly recommend grading for your size. So if your waist is in, one category and your hips are in the other, that would be totally normal. Don't worry about the bust measurement for these, but if your waist and hips are in different sizes, I would grade the pattern to accommodate that because they are a pretty close fit. So first thing I want to talk about is measuring yourself. This is a really important part because if you don't do this correctly, your your leggings aren't going to fit you right. So when we measure, we want to measure our waist and our hips. Like I said, the bust measurement is completely irrelevant for a pair of leggings. So you want to take your measuring tape and put it around yourself. Now you don't want to do this with like a sweatshirt on or something like that. I have a pretty thin fitting tank on, so it should be fine. You want to find your natural waist, and you can find that if you bend over where that crease is. That is your natural waist. So put the measuring tape right at that spot and then measure yourself. Jot down that measurement, and then you're going to measure your hips. Now the hips are around the fullest part of your bottom and your hip, so make sure you find where that spot is. You might need to kind of shimmy the measuring tape around a little bit, and then jot down that measurement as well. Again, you're ideally doing this, just with underwear on, or in my case, these Super Gs, are pretty well fitted, so it doesn't really throw off my measurement to measure with those on. Another little tip, make sure you're using a newer measuring tape. Sometimes these can get stretched out. My kids like to play tug of war with them, so I had to buy a new one because, if you're using something like this, it does stretch a little bit, and over time, you might feel like your measurements are getting smaller when they're not. They're not really, unfortunately. So go ahead and jot down those measurements and then find where you are in the size chart, and then select your sizes. If you're new to purchasing and printing out a Greenstyle pattern, I have a Greenstyle 101 blog post that I'll link in my first sew along blog post on my blog that kind of walks you through the steps of how to purchase a pattern, how to select the layers. What that means is that each size is layered so that you can only print out the sizes that you need. And then how to assemble your pattern. I'm not going to go over that right here, but there is a really informative blog post on it, and you can absolutely feel free to ask questions. So after you've looked at the size chart and figured out what size you should sew, now we have to talk about some other supplies. So the first thing that I want to chat about is fabric. The Super G leggings require 75% 4-way stretch. So what that means is that 4 inches of fabric is going to stretch to about 7 inches along both sides. And the reason that you need that is because you want them to stretch around you, but you also need them to stretch up and down, because as you bend your knees or maybe do a high kick or something, you're going to need to have the pattern stretch up and down, the fabric stretch up and down as well as around your body. So this is really important for these leggings. You can get a lot of really high quality athletic knits that'll have really good stretch. Recovery is also crucial, so that means that when you stretch it, it goes right back. Stretch it, goes right back. Now some fabrics like cotton interlock or something would not be appropriate for this pattern. They probably wouldn't have the stretch, but they also aren't going to have the recovery. So you just want to make sure that your fabric just recovers as it stretches along both sides. Now, even with 4-way stretch, you'll find that one direction of the fabric has more stretch than the other. So if you find the grain line on the fabric, that's across the selvages, which are the finished edges, you can see, test it and see which direction has the most stretch. Usually that's going, from one side of the selvage to the other, across the little ribs. There are tiny little ribs in your fabric. So usually, I don't know if you can see that very well, but there are little ribs running this way. Usually the stretch would then be running across those ribs. But definitely test out your fabric and see, because every piece of fabric is different. Now you'll need 1 1/4 to 1 1/2 yards of fabric. I'm used to buying 1 yard cuts of athletic fabric because I can usually get a pair of leggings out of that because I'm pretty short. But for this pattern, it has a really long gusset. You're really going to need 1 1/4 to 1 1/2 yards. Now, if you have a favorite 1 yard cut of fabric and you're making, one of the shorter inseam versions, you may be able to get away with that by shortening the gusset a little bit. But in general, 1 1/4 to 1 1/2 yards for all the sizes. Something else that you're going to want to have on hand is some clear elastic. My clear elastic always looks like a kind of new age bird's nest here, but you can use 1/4 inch clear elastic or 3/8 inch clear elastic. It really doesn't matter. I order mine off Amazon, and this is going to really make the difference in terms of keeping the leggings up. If you've ever had a leggings pattern pair of leggings that tends to kind of roll down as you move or as you run or exercise or just kind of walk around during the day, that can really be alleviated by sewing the clear elastic into the top of the waistband. And Greenstyle gives you instructions, and I'll go over how to do that with the pattern. So you're going to need that, not too much, because you're just really putting it around your waist. And then, obviously the usual, some pattern weights. Rotary cutter's a must for me when cutting knits, but I always have a good pair of gingham shears on hand as well. And then you're going to need some thread. I just use polyester all-purpose thread in my sewing machine or my serger. Some people like to use something like Maxi Lock Stretch that gives the seams a little bit of extra give, but that's up to you. You don't have to have a serger or a cover stitch machine in order to sew these. I have both, and I will be showing how I use them, but you can absolutely do all the construction on your sewing machine with a stretch stitch or a zigzag stitch if you don't have access to a serger or a cover stitch machine. So don't feel like you can't sew athletic wear if you don't have those other types of machines, because you absolutely can. So those are our supplies. So make sure that you've got all of that handy. And now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the 2 options in the pattern. This pattern is really awesome because I feel like it's kind of 2 in 1. One of the views has, and I'll post a more detailed picture on my blog, but it has 2 leg side seams with a pocket. This is a really nice, generously sized pocket, really easy to construct, and it holds a large phone pretty easily. So this pair has that pocket on both sides. Another one of the views has no side seams. This is really great when you don't want to break up a print, when you don't want to worry about matching it, or whatnot. The no side seam view is also really quick and easy. So if you are wanting to make a muslin, a test garment of this pattern before you get started, the no side seam view would be what I would recommend just for that test, because they just really sew up like that. Now, the no side seam version does not have a pocket, but I did a hack on my blog for how to add a zipper pocket to the back of the waistband, and I've really been loving that on my no side seam version. So I'll link that in my blog post for today as well, if you want to check out that. If you're going to plan on doing that, you're going to need to have a zipper, either an invisible zipper or a regular zipper that's anywhere from, we'll say like 9 to 12 inches long, and you're probably going to be cutting some off of there, but that'll just kind of make sure that you have the right equipment for that. I also find wash away wonder tape really helpful when installing a zipper, so that's another supply that you might want to consider. But just to start out for today, think about, do I want to do the no side seam version, or do I want to do the version with the side seams and the pockets? Now, another potential hack for you, or idea for you, is to do one leg with the side seam in the pocket and one leg with no side seam. And that's what I'm going to be demonstrating for the sew along, because I want to be able to show you both of the views and how to construct both of the views. So that's another option for you as well. Once you've decided on which view you're going to sew, you're going to want to go ahead and cut out your fabric. So I'm going to take you over to my cutting table, and I'm going to show you what the different options look like and the different pieces that you'll need for each. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the no side seam version first. When you go to trace out your pattern, you'll notice that you have this portion in the middle that says discard for side pocket. So if you are making the version with no side seams, you're going to leave that intact, and you're going to just trace out the whole entire leg pattern to start. So make sure you label the front and the back of the leg. You can see the rise on the front is shorter than the rise of the back to leave room for your bottom, but you're just going to want to trace out that whole leg piece. Make sure that you mark your gusset on your traced pattern piece, and also select the inside seam that you want to use. I would recommend measuring yourself from your crotch point down to determine where those inseam lengths are going to hit you. Because it's different for everyone. Just because you're a certain height does not mean that you have the same inseam as other people. So I have about a 29-inch inseam to the floor. The 21-inch inseam is about capri length on me. The 26 is kind of, I don't know what you would call it, like ankle length, a little tiny bit shorter than full length. But that really differs for everyone. It is, height is a general guideline, so there are length and shorten lines included in your pattern. I didn't trace them off on here because I don't personally adjust. I just choose the inseam that works for me. But if you do want to adjust for height, you would overlap or separate your pattern along that length and shorten line. In general, Greenstyle drafts for a height of 5'7". This pattern tends to run a little bit long. So you may find that even if you're taller, you may not, measure your inseam. You may not need to lengthen that at all, but you might. So that's something to definitely consider when you trace out your pattern. So if you're making the no side seam version, you'll need 2 mirror images of the leg piece. You'll need 1 gusset piece, and this is pretty long. So this is why you need that extra fabric. There are also length and shorten lines on here. Make sure that you mark the front and the back of the gusset. This is going to be hard to tell later, so you want to make sure that you mark that. And if you're adjusting the legs for height, you may also need to adjust the gusset. And then you'll need your waistband pieces. Greenstyle patterns generally include an inner and outer waistband. So there's an inner and outer front and an inner and outer back waistband. And this is so that, you can see that these waistbands are contoured. And there's an inner and outer so that they really, the seam will fold toward the inside and not be visible from the outside of your leggings. So you want to make sure that you have these as well. If your waist is a smaller or a larger size than your hips, you may be making adjustments to your waistband pieces, and you would do that to all 4 waistband pieces. So for example, if your waist is a larger size than your hips, you may need to draw a line that looks more like this, grading from one size down to the other at the bottom of the waistband. Or if your waist is a smaller size than your hip, you may need to take it in a little bit there as well. Now you can always make up just a waistband, just an inner and outer waistband, and see how the waistband fits you. I'm using the high rise waistband. There is a medium rise waistband. The high rise hits me right about my belly button. So that's another decision point. Where do you what kind of waistband do you want to have? And then make up a test one and see if you like how that's feeling. Keep in mind that clear elastic is really going to help keep it up. So those are the pieces that you're going to want to cut if you are doing the no side seam version. If you are doing the version with the side seam, you're going to want to cut your gusset and your inner and outer front and back waistbands. But you're going to, instead of cutting that large leg piece, you're going to cut it apart in the middle, and you're going to need 2 mirror images of the front, 2 mirror images of the back. So this is where the pattern had that discard for side pocket version and that I cut apart here. You're gonna look at these pieces and go, there's no way that's gonna fit me. I promise you that it will. These always look super tiny to me, but you're gonna wanna make sure, just as you did before, to mark the gusset points on the front and the back. And then if you are lengthening or shortening your pieces, make sure that you do that equally to all the affected pieces. You'll also be adding an upper pocket. You're gonna cut 2 mirror images of the upper pocket and 2 mirror images of the lower pocket. Again, if you're lengthening and shortening, there's a lengthen shorten line on the lower pocket. That would affect this piece too. You'll notice that the upper and lower pockets have a line up pocket here line. I cut notches in these spots, just tiny little clips into my fabric. You could also mark them with something like a piece of chalk. Just test it to make sure that it comes out. I've had that happen to me, unfortunately, where it hasn't. So make sure that you mark those spots so that you can have the pocket line up correctly. And then go ahead and cut your pieces out of your fabric for whatever view you're doing. Just a little tip on the waistbands. For the inner waistbands, the inner front and the inner back, I will often use a contrast fabric. Now this pattern in general is great for color blocking, so you can use a different fabric for the waistband, different fabric for the side pockets, even maybe a fun power mesh in the lower side pocket, but if you're doing that version. But I also usually use a different fabric for my inner waistbands. I'll find something thinner than my fashion fabric, something that wicks sweat well, and it also just helps me distinguish them as I'm sewing them together. Now, as noted on all the pattern pieces, this pattern does have a 3/8 inch seam allowance, and the greatest stretch is marked. So when you're cutting your fabric out, you're going to want to make sure that you're, positioning these pieces so that the greatest stretch, is running across them horizontally. So go ahead and cut out all of your pieces. I'm going to do that, and then I'll come back to the table and show you what that looks like. Okay. So paying attention to the grain line and the stretch, I've cut out my pieces for the version with the side seam. I've cut out the back pieces, cut out the front pieces, cut out my upper pocket and my longer lower pocket, kind of folded up here to fit on my cutting table. I've cut out my long gusset piece, and I've marked the front and the back where it's going to attach the front and the back of the crotch of the leggings. On the leggings, I cut out my outer waistband pieces, and I've cut out my inner waistband pieces. So those are all the pieces that you should need. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 pieces for the side seam version. And then actually, some of that's going to be more than one piece, but that's a number of pattern pieces that you should have out. Now, if you're sewing the version with no side seam, I'll show you that in just a second. Okay, so the version with no side seam is going to be similar, but you're going to lose some of those pocket pieces. You're going to have 2 of these leg pieces. You're going to have the gusset, the inner or the outer waistbands, and the inner waistbands. Now I'm doing one of each, so I only have, you know, one of these legs and one of the other legs with the pocket pieces for that. And if you're doing that, make sure that you're cutting them so that those end up being mirror images as well. So you end up with, you know, one leg of each that works out right. So those are the pieces that you're going to need. That's all we're going to do today. If you have any questions, please comment on the post in the Sew Along group with them. And, you know, also please leave a picture of your progress. I'd love to see what kind of fabric you're using. It's always fun to see how people put together their fabrics and their colors. So that's it for today. You're off to a great start, and I'll see you back tomorrow.